Hey, how's it going? It's been a while since I've given an update on my project. That's because I haven't really found a good place to show off what I've been doing. Most of what I've accomplished so far has been mostly stuff on the back burner. Um, so it's not completely a concise project yet. I've been working on improving the animation side of things and uh, adding like kind of an ability system, but I don't want to really get in too much depth about that so far because I'm not exactly sure where I'm going to be going with that. So I'm just going to show off a little bit of what I've gotten done, but I should be giving a bigger update once that's ready. Um, so first of all, I've added to the animations, I've added some clamping. Also, I've upgraded to Unreal Engine 5. Not that that really makes a huge difference. So one thing that I did is I've added settings for clamping for the elbows. So, oh yeah, this is another thing that I'm working on. I'm like horrible with UI, by the way, so don't really mind that. But like, I'm gonna be working on a dynamic attachment system where you can actually change the attachments like mid-game like this without having to actually have a menu. So you just press T or something, and it'll have a drop down of all the attachments. It's like I just set this up really quickly. This isn't going to obviously be the final product. But yeah, what would originally happen when I would swivel the gun like this is that the elbows, well, I can't really put my mouse cursor in the other screen, but what would happen is the elbow would just completely match the rotation of the gun, so your elbow would be going into your body. But now, through some settings, if I open that really quick, within the rig itself, um, should be up here. Yeah, there should be some clamping values. So at the moment, for each of the horizontal axes on each elbow for the minimum, which is minimum is going to be towards yourself. So that's right, the right clamp for the left elbow and the left clamp for the right elbow. That's kind of confusing, but right now it's clamped to -2, so it could just barely go inside. Uh, your elbow could barely go into yourself, but the rest of the ranges are just open, so it's free to uh, go out as much as it wants. So I think that's a pretty good value. That was actually very hard to set up. That was harder than I anticipated it would be, but anyways. One of the other things I've worked on is I created a whole system for this thing that I'm calling a polymorphic struct. So it's basically a kind of container struct that you can put any struct inside of. So this actually took a very long time, not to make the struct itself, but setting up the blueprint compatibility was pretty difficult and some just annoyances. So right here I've got one of my variables. I have a poly struct. So the way you'd use this is, let's just do this on the server so I could show something off right now. Okay. So right now, this is being a rep notify. So this poly struct is a rep notify right now. So theoretically, I mean, it does work, you'll see, but whenever I change the value within this, it should call the onRep function. So right now, this is an empty struct. It has no data in it. And the way that this thing works is that it will carry around data of any other struct that you put into it, and it has to be a struct, by the way. This is something that's necessary for replication purposes. So if you want to have like a float or something, you're gonna have to just wrap it around a struct, but that's not too much to ask for, I hope. Um, so what you do is you just do set, and it's a set. Okay, that's the wrong one. Set polystruct, and I'm going to just do this on the server so you can see that it's going to call a rep notify. So when you set it, right now when I try and click compile, it's going to give an error. You need to put in this wildcard parameter. So this can be any struct, just like the arrays. So if I like So if I get something that isn't a struct and I try and put it in, it's just gonna give you an error saying it must be a struct. So at least most of my nodes have that functionality, but that's really hard, annoying to set up, so I didn't do that for all of them. So if I do like make vector, this should work. And let's just give this a random value. So down here on the client side, you're going to get your struct, and you can get. And in blueprints, it's kind of impossible to actually return a struct by reference. Otherwise, I would really love to just basically have a cast node for a struct. So you could like cast it like you would an object, but you can't really do that without some extreme hackery in blueprints, but that's extremely easy to do in C++. I just call a cast function. So that's kind of annoying, but yeah, anyways. So now when you get it, it will, if it's the correct type, like if you actually want to cast it to a type that's it's actually holding, or a child of it, then it'll call success, otherwise it'll call fail. So break vector. So we're just going to cast it back to the vector. This isn't actually casting. When I'm calling get, it's copying it. But anyways, so now here I can like print the value. If I play, and it's going to say 999, just like it was here. And you can add a delay. And I can set this back to something else. And I've got multiple clients playing, so it's going to do the message multiple times. But yeah, so it replicates properly, and you can store any struct in there. And a helper thing that I made for primarily blueprints, but this is mostly, the polystruct is mostly useful for this API that I'm going to create, because other systems like the gameplay ability system, and not necessarily the gameplay ability system, but some other systems feel like they kind of lock you into like you have to work around their API, and I don't really want to do that. I want you to be able to pass in whatever context you want, so you could just make a polystruct, and that's one of the parameters in there, and you could put whatever struct you want in there. So when you override some function, you want to do something extra, you can extract their data and your data. And something that's helpful for that is polystruct handle, which polystruct handle, this is basically in a nutshell, it's just an array of polystructs, but they're being passed around by shared pointers. So when you're like setting when you have a polystruct handle and you've like want to pass it to an effect, which I'm going to be working on, so like that ability system that I mentioned earlier, something similar. You can keep passing them around and copying and storing, and you won't actually be copying the internal data. So that's actually extremely useful for performance, but also like you can change the data as you go without it just constantly copying, and if it's being referenced to multiple places. So with this right here, there's a wildcard parameter for a struct that it wants in. So let's do a rotator this time. You can pass in whatever struct that you create as well. Yeah. And let's just put this in all of these for now. So with this, you can do get at, and this will basically extract the polystruct at the index for the handle. So right now we're just going to do the 0th index and just break rotator here. And we can just print this. I'm gonna just play standalone so we don't get so many print messages. Also, this replicates as well. It doesn't actually support the dynamic replication like I showed a second ago for the just generic polystruct, where it can update whenever you change something, but you shouldn't be using this for that anyways. If you're going to be having a reference, you should just use an array of polystructs. And if you're not passing it around everywhere, like just having a standard replicated variable. But anyways, so yeah, if we play, it prints 342, and you can get some other index. Just get the third index. It should be the exact same. Well, let's just change it up a bit for third index. And yeah, it's getting the third index. So that's something else that I created. One other thing I've been working on is, this is not how you should be using attributes at all, but basically I've got an attributes, I'm working on attributes. So if we do another switch authority, so we could just do it on the server, all of this should be replicated as well, what I'm doing here. So right now this is just marked as replicated, but the way that I've hooked up attributes for the moment, and by the way, an attribute is basically just a float value, but it just comes with some helpers. So whenever it's changed, it will broadcast a delegate, and that delegate will be broadcasted even if it's being serialized. So you don't need to make a bunch of on-rep functions that do the exact same thing, just broadcasting a delegate. Like, you can basically just reference the exact thing. I'll show it right here. So actually, before the authority, let's just do bind delegate unchanged. And just create an event. There will be an actual attributes component that's going to work with this, because you don't want to be setting the value manually like I'm going to be showing here. I'm going to actually be removing that functionality in a bit, but just for an example, let's just set it. Set attribute value. And by the way, this should just be 0 right now, so let's just set this to like 100. And so right now we're setting this only on the server, but since it's replicated, when it's net serialized, I should intercept that. And even though it's not, this isn't like an on-rep function or anything, it's just a standard delegate. It comes with a delegate internally, so it should broadcast that on the client as well. So just print that. Oh, I'm playing a standalone. Okay, I actually needed to add a small delay because the property on the server was being replicated before it was even being bound on the client side, but now you'll see when I play, it's being called on both server and client, and it should be called on all instances as well, as if that's your replication policy, that is. So that's just a brief overview of what I've done so far. It's not much, but it's hopefully gonna all come together soon. This project is getting fairly big, and I'm not entirely sure if I should be creating an entire like ability system and all of that. I think the polystruct is something useful, but I'm not entirely sure if I'm like doing too much or too little, because I don't know if this is going to become too inflexible or if I'm going to be doing too little. I may release this and just update it as it goes. I'm not exactly sure what to do from here on out. But anyways, that's just a brief overview. So that's what I've got for now. So see ya.